Hi, I'm Rich, welcome back to my channel. This was a Yamaha Virago XV535 and we've got a couple of repairs to do on it. So if you're at all familiar with the XV535, you'll notice that this isn't by any means a stock standard vehicle. When I bought it, it pretty much was standard, very highly chromed, a small cruiser, and I've lowered it with a lower seat, as in I've completely chopped the back end off and fitted a solo seat pan to it. And I've kind of really ratted it up. It's got straight through pipes on the side. I've done a 2-into-1 carburettor conversion, and I think it looks absolutely great. So we've got a little firing issue at the moment because now I've sold the Honda CX500. I've got a bit more space in the garage, and this is the next bike that I want to just work on and get properly running so that I can either get out and about on it or get it sold. But we're not getting a spark on the front cylinder. So if your front cylinder is not firing, then it could be a spark issue, it could be a fuel and air issue, but you can rule out fuel and air on this instantly because, as I said, I've done a single carburettor conversion. So I've got one carburettor servicing both cylinders, rear cylinders firing, so it's not a carburettor fuel air issue, it's a spark issue. I've pulled the plug, it was very sooty, very wet, presumably because it was a sooted up plug and it's getting fuel but not sparking. Dried it off, put it back in, still wouldn't fire. So pulled the plug, held the plug against the block of the engine. I was getting a spark intermittently, swapped the plugs over on the rear and the front cylinder, same issue, rear cylinder firing absolutely fine, front very intermittent, so we know it's not the spark plug. Pulled the plug cap, or before I pulled it off, just took the plug cap off and touched it on the top of the spark plug, and the engine fired no problem whatsoever. Push it all the way home and it stopped firing. So this tells me I've got a dodgy plug cap. This is an NGK. I don't know how old it is. It could be as old as the bike. It looks in good nick, but the bike hasn't been used an awful lot. But these are kind of complex little things and lots can go wrong and you won't necessarily see by looking at it. So we can test it and we can surmise what might be wrong with it. I suspect that it's just a leaky plug cap, like you get leaky HT leads sometimes and you see them arcing across to the block. So the electricity is not going where it's meant to be going. You push it all the way down onto the plug and it stops firing. It's possibly just grounding out on the frame and shorting out that way. Because as soon as you pull the plug cap off and just touch it lightly on the top of the spark plug, the cylinder fires. So it's dodgy in some way, shape or form. Now these little things have got resistors inside them, so it's made up of a pin and a spring and a resistor, and then the cap that goes down onto the top of the spark plug, and something in there is going to be faulty. So we're going to take it apart, we're going to have a little look at it, and if the resistor turns out to be faulty, we can just swap the resistor, and if it's not that, then we'll just swap the spark plug, the plug cap, because I dare say if the resistor's fine, then it's not going to be something we can actually service. It's going to be cracked, split in some way. It's just not serviceable, and it's just too cheap to worry about. So I have got a spare now, so we're going to have a little look at this one, and then we'll get that little issue sorted. Okay, so let's just take a look at the spark plug cap, shall we? Because these things do go wrong. If you think it is just like a connector that sort of connects a lead to the plug, no. They are a little bit more complicated than that. You can see in the end there, you've got like a little screw thread, well, a sort of screwdriver slot. That kind of indicates that screws out and back in again. And then that end, you've got the what looks like the actual end of a screw, which your HT lead screws onto. And in between, you've got a couple of other bits. Let me just take it apart and I'll show you. These are quite easy to get apart, but they have a bit of a giggle to put back together. No, it's not come yet, because when you try and screw that back in, let me show you all these bits. Let's put that away. when you try and screw this piece back in, it's pushing against a spring and it's kind of bobbling around. It's very difficult to get seated. Anyway, so let's shut the cap again so you can see the hole in there goes all the way. It's a blind hole, and at the base of that is the other end of that screw thread, and then I'll show you. So the spring drops down into there, like so. Okay, there you go. To continue the continuity, same thing, isn't it? Then you've got the resistor there. Now that's the bit that should have somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 ohms of resistance in. We'll test that in a minute. It goes there. And then you've just got the screw cap that goes in at the end. So there you go. So throughout this whole system should be a resistance reading of about 5,000 to 7,000 ohms, as I mentioned. So let's just test the spring. Now you'll expect to see continuity through there. Now you can see the multimeter at the moment is set to 20,000 ohms because you need to set it to the next possible reading above the reading that you're looking for, just like when you're testing for voltage or something like that. So it's showing a 1 at the moment because there's no continuity, so there's infinite resistance, and the 1 just denotes on this readout infinite resistance. If I was to touch the probes across, then you'll see continuity. It doesn't tell you what the resistance reading is because this is a multimeter and it doesn't want to be reading its own resistance readings, so it kind of just cancels those out for the reading. So 0 means continuity, 1 means infinite resistance, as in a break in a connection somewhere. So if we just test the spring there, the little wiggly thing doesn't keep slipping its way out of my hands. There you go, continuity, put that away, which you'd expect. If we just test the screw cap, continuity, and if we test the resistor, so we're looking for somewhere between, you should see a different reading this time, we're looking for some actual resistance readings. There you go, just a shade over 5,000 ohms of resistance. So that's all fine, which is a little bit. So let's put it all back together. Spring in, resistor in. Now this might be, as I said, a little bit fiddly. Right, there you go, seat it all the way. Now if I probe both ends of this, you would expect to see the same 5,000 ohms of resistance, and we've got nothing there. Okay, so I can tell you, have to take my word for it, that probe is touching on that screw thread and that is definitely in there. But you can see there's a breaking continuity there. So we've got the screw pin, the spring, the resistor, and then the end cap, and we've tested 3 of those bits, and there should definitely be continuity there. If we were getting all kinds of weird resistance, very high resistance readings, that would be a bit of a worry. I dare say from that what this means is we've just got a dodgy connection in that screw bit there. So there's nothing we can do with this. I'm going to keep the resistor because I can use that again another time if I have a resistor fail, but I'm going to chuck the rest away because it's absolutely useless. So I have got another one of these now, so voila, a red one. It's also an NGK, brand new, and if we just, well, in fact it's showing a little low on the resistance side, and actually this is marked up at 5,000 ohms. It's not critical, you need around that, so I said 5 to 7, you know, 4 and a half almost will do. It will certainly do far better than a spark plug cap with no continuity. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and get this on the bike, and that should fix the problem, and we will get her fired up, and then I'll show you the rest of the bits that we're going to do with it. Okay, let's get this baby fired up. if you heard that. That front cylinder, you heard the engine, don't know if you heard me. That front cylinder's still a little bit lumpy. This one's just spitting and coughing. The lower exhaust out of the two. That sounds very, very lumpy. So you've got literally the one carburettor servicing both cylinders. So that tells you it's not a carb issue. Could still be spark. I suspect that front cylinder's just really coked up and is just not enjoying running. So that's something we can look at a little later in more depth. But for now I'm going to leave it there. I'm just going to wait for these electrical bits to turn up so we can finish this bike off. And then we're going to move on to the CB500 and the engine teardown. So look out for those videos and I shall catch you in a bit.